The name of the movie is 999. The film begins with a man named Michael planning a robbery with a gang consisting of Russell Welch and his ex-cop brother Gabe. Michael and his gang are hired by a mafia boss to steal a deposit from a bank. The deposit contains information that could cause a Russian gang leader to get out of prison, imprisoned for several crimes he committed. Seeing that their job this time is too difficult, Michael decides to recruit 2 more men into the gang, the corrupt cops Marcus Belmont and Franco Rodriguez. Michael promised them a big reward if they helped him with the task. Soon after, the gang started preparing to rob. There was a cruel woman and she brutally killed anyone who dared to betray her. This woman is Irina Vlaslov and she is the wife of the gang leader who hired Michael and his gang. We see a police detective named Chris Allen who was getting ready to go to work. Before he left, his wife, Michelle, and their young son said goodbye to him, and then he left. We return again to Michael and those with him as they prepare to storm the bank. After they wore masks and carried weapons, Michael killed all the guards. As for Russell, he was in the car watching the police. Michael threatened the bank manager and asked him to open the required safe, which he took the entire box. Gabe was filling the suitcase with money, although stealing the money was not part of the plan. After taking what was required of them, they rushed outside and blew up the entrance before leaving. When they were on the way, red smoke suddenly started coming from the bag that Gabe had filled with money, causing the driver to lose control of the steering wheel and had to stop the car due to the heavy traffic. Because of their situation, Michael and his gang made a fuss in the middle of the road by shooting in all directions, stole another car and got away. Before that, they blew up the car they used in the theft to hide their traces. After escaping from the police, they find a place to hide, and there they blame each other for what happened. Franco and Marcus have a fight with Gabe because he stole money he shouldn't have taken in the first place. Michael then intervenes to break up the fight and they subsequently set the stolen car on fire and disperse. Russell blamed Gabe for what he had done. It turns out that Russell was a former Marine, like Michael, while Gabe was a good policeman, but he was fired for an unknown reason. We see a police sergeant named Jeffrey who is assigned to the robbery case committed by Michael and his group. It turns out that the safe they stole belonged to a Russian billionaire named Dmitry, but Jeffrey didn't know why the safe was stolen. Meanwhile, Chris, who turns out to be Jeffrey's nephew, has arrived at the police station after hearing about the robbery. The suspects, according to witnesses, used Spanish to communicate with each other. It turned out that Marcus and Franco were also at the center and spoke Spanish very well, but they were relaxed and confident that no one would suspect them. Chris becomes Marcus' partner in the investigation even though he always hated and ignored him. Meanwhile, Michael takes the stolen safe to Irina, the chief's wife. Michael seemed very happy when Irina brought his son, who turned out to be Irina's nephew, because the mother of the child is Irina's younger sister Elena. And the reason Michael wants to work with Irina and her husband is because Irina threatens to take the baby and Elena from him. Since he succeeded in his mission, Michael asked Irina to fulfill her promise and to allow him to take Elena and their son in addition to paying his dues. She refused to return Elena and her son to Michael and also refused to pay him because he had to do another mission, which was to break into the Department of Homeland Security office and steal more data on her husband. Because the evidence in the safe deposit box wouldn't be useful if it wasn't accompanied by the information in the database, which is located in the office of the Department of Homeland Security. When Michael is about to leave, he sees Irina, who is in an important meeting with FBI agents who work with Irina's husband. Irina gave her sister the phone because her husband called her. As for Michael, he had no choice but to contact his group to tell them about the next mission. Suddenly, Russell, who is on his way to meet Michael, is captured by Irina's henchmen. She did it on purpose to threaten Michael and the rest of his group. Michael met with the rest somewhere, and they were waiting for Russell to arrive, but they were surprised by Russell's car, which was going in a strange way, and because they realized that there was something, they ran towards the car to find Russell seriously injured, forcing Michael to kill him to everyone's amazement. Michael decides to continue the mission with the rest. The next day, Chris and Marcus are assigned to work on a suspected gang-related murder case. To find out more about the case, Chris decided to ask a group of gangsters who had gathered around the crime scene. He tried to interrogate them about the case, but the gang members refused to cooperate with him and insulted him. Chris almost gets into a fight with them before Marcus breaks it up. Marcus warns Chris of the mobsters he had a fight with and tells him that they will kill him if necessary. In the evening, Chris meets Jeffrey at the bar, and there he tells him that the bank robbery might be much bigger than they thought. Chris tries to interrogate a local gang member and finally gets information about the mastermind behind the murder case. Chris and Marcus then form a team of officers who raid the home of a mobster suspected of being the killer. A shootout took place between the police and the gang led by Luis Pinto. While trying to arrest the gangster, Chris was shot and the man managed to escape. Marcus grabbed him and got into a fight with him until Chris arrived and shot him. On the other hand, Jeffrey, who was investigating the bank case, received information from someone saying that Gabe was involved in the operation. Meanwhile, Michael tells Irina that he will soon fulfill her request and asks her to let him talk to Elena and their son. She lets him talk to her. Elena tells him she's in Tel Aviv with her son. As for Gabe, who was bemoaning the death of his brother Russell, he tried to tell Chris everything, but Marcus found out and pushed him away. When Chris asked who he was, he told him he was an informant. After that, Gabe tries to visit Chris at his home so that Jeffrey's informant, Trina Ling, can find out where he is. So she calls Jeffrey, who runs to check on Chris. Gabe runs away when he learns that the police are on their way to Chris' house. On the day of the assignment, Marcus takes Chris to an abandoned housing project to meet an informant who claims to have information about the murder case. Franco enters the Department of Homeland Security's office to steal data. Chris and Marcus will enter the abandoned building and Marcus will sneak away in the dark. As for Luis Pinto, he will enter and try to find Chris. So it turns out that Luis entered the building to kill Chris on the orders of Marcus, but suddenly Chris met Gabe, who tried to warn Chris of what would happen to him, and before he finished speaking, Luis attacked them and tried to shoot Chris, but Gabe was killed instead. Luis fled the scene. As for Chris, he tried to interrogate Gabe, who was seriously injured, and before he could say anything, Marcus entered them and shot Gabe and Chris, killing Gabe in the end, and he was shot in the head. Worried that Marcus might die, Chris called the police for help, but it turned out to be Michael and Franco's secret code, so the mission began. Meanwhile, Michael and Franco break into the Ministry of Security's office. They managed to steal the information after they confronted the police. After the accident, Michael met Irina in exchange, but Irina only gave him money and refused to give him his son. After they beat him up, Michael returns to his car and detonates a bomb he had placed in the gift he gave Irina, causing her and her followers to die. Michael then goes to share the money with Franco, who kills him and steals the money. Marcus was in a coma due to the shooting accident. Meanwhile, Chris gets information about Luis, who was killed by the SWAT team. Chris finds a note in Luis' wallet that says where Marcus took him the day of the shooting. Chris later learns that Marcus met Luis the day of the accident and ordered him to kill Chris. Shortly after Chris visits Marcus in the hospital, he finds Franco there and calls him to the police station to ask him about the incident. As the two head to the car, Chris receives a call from Jeffrey telling him that Franco was involved in the robbery and the shooting of Marcus and Luis. As they were heading towards the car, Jeffrey, who was in the back seat, saw Franco's car and they both shot each other. Franco was killed and Jeffrey was shot in the stomach. Eventually, Chris called the police trying to save his uncle Jeffrey. Here the movie ends. Thank you for watching.